For more on what Whole Foods means for the gentrification of Washington, I'm joined by Ed Lazier from the DC Fiscal Policy Institute and Clinton Yates, columnist for the Washington Post, the Metro section. Thank you guys for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Of
I
course.
want to start off, just sort of get your reactions, Clinton, and we got some tweets on this, and from Everett F. Boyd, he says Whole Foods signs lease on H Street, great signal about the commitment to the H Street Atlas District. Another person, Jason Cherkis, 10 years ago, DC gentrification meant every neighborhood got a CVS. Now gentrification means everyone gets a Whole Foods. Clinton, what was your response when you heard yet another Whole Foods? This is going to bring the total to 6.
What I thought was, I'm interested to see if this place is going to replace Murray's, because one of the things that I have a big issue with is that people sort of think, oh, you bring a Whole Foods and all of a sudden everybody is either not affording the food or they're all eating better, but there's still the basic problem of food access in a lot of these places that I think something like a Whole Foods, at least on the very level, solves. There's many instances of, and I guess what I'm saying is I think what they need to do is make sure that it's more than just bringing your prices down. It's a matter of educating people in those neighborhoods about what is healthier living and what is better food, what are better food options to keep them alive longer. I mean, in Ward 8, they had a Yes Organic Market that went there. Not a lot of effort was put in by the owner, and nobody went there as a result. And so it's not just a matter of plopping down a grocery store in a neighborhood. It's a matter of making sure that everybody understands around you what the purposes are of healthier living.
Right, and there is a sense that when these Whole Foods move into these neighborhoods, they've moved into Detroit, for instance, they lower prices, they add more packaged food and more frozen food as well. Ed?
Murray's is not a glamorous store, but it is meeting a really vital function for working class residents in DC. I was actually just at the Murray's this morning, and you walk in, the first thing you see is produce.
Yeah.
They've got apples, they've got pears, they've got bananas and onions and potatoes, greens, etc. So it's not simply a store of junk food. It is actually a place where people can get low cost goods. So the extent to which people are buying food like chicken bologna isn't because that's what they want to eat, it's because what they can afford. So I am actually really concerned that a Whole Foods going in will limit access that low-income residents have to affordable produce and affordable groceries in general.
Yeah, we got a tweet from Adam Zalewski. He says Whole Foods coming to DC's Navy Yard and to H Street Northeast, overpriced groceries for all. So, I mean, I think he has those same concerns. I want this whole idea of, you feel like everyone, when they run for office or they're on the council, they talk about sort of halting the gentrification, halting what might be called black flight, but it still is consistently happening. Clinton, what's your sense of that?
I mean, I think that it's
Is
a lot.
it
It's hard to blame that on just a grocery store, I
Right.
think. I mean, I know there's obvious correlations between property values and all that, but again, when you're talking about healthy food options, if a grocery store actually shows a commitment towards trying to not only make the food affordable, but teach people, I mean, again, that's what it comes down to with food, teaching people how to stay alive longer in order for, not just for the sake of goodwill, but frankly, so they can be customers longer. And I think that if a group, like you take, for example, what happened at Union Market, there was the old Capital City Farmers Market there, and then Eden's came in and they made Union Market, and a lot of people were like, what is this? This is a gourmet place that I don't really understand how I'm supposed to get anything out of this. But they've made some efforts to go into local schools and teach a little bit more about what it means to go from farm to table and what it means to have access to foods that aren't just the ones that are on the shelves and processed. And I know that's sort of a macro look at things, but I really do think that's important. If any group does that, Whole Foods, Wegmans, anybody, if they can make an effort to that, I think a lot more residents who are already here will be confident that they are willing to do something more than just lower their prices to, keep them around.
Yeah, Scott Allshouse, who is Whole Foods Market's Mid-Atlantic regional president, about this move, referring to H Street, he says that neighborhood reflects a lot of what Whole Foods is about. Diversity, passion for food, history, things like that. That's what we are too. We are so in tune with that sense of community and pride. Your reaction to that, Ed?
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think Clinton's notion that we need to educate people on healthy food options, really for the entire country, right? If
Yeah.
you look around, it's not just
It's a matter
any
of
one
public health.
There is
population.
an obesity
Yeah,
problem.
it's
Right.
a matter of public health.
But we also know that there are programs in the city, for example, that help small corner grocery stores, which typically don't market healthy food, to help them put a basket of apples up front or to buy a refrigerator so they can sell fresh produce. And people actually buy those things when they're available. So when it's available, communities, low-income, working-class communities will buy those things. So I think that is also part of the solution. I don't expect, because of the prices of Whole Foods, that working class residents are going to be able to benefit, even if they know exactly what to eat, that they're going to be able to benefit from that. And I think that that Councilmember McDuffie's arguments about balanced development are really what we need. We want to encourage development in the city, so that to the extent that we're getting new grocery stores and new housing, it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you balance that? How do you also find areas of the city where we can preserve affordable housing, where we can preserve affordable retail? The city has programs, for example, that help tenants buy their buildings
Right.
when the building goes on the market. And that means, and that's one reason Columbia Heights has remained diverse. There are people who bought homes there when their landlord tried to sell because they got help from the city. And they're now still affordable, even though the city is no longer helping them. There's sustainable, affordable housing in a gentrifying neighborhood.
One of the things we actually called Murray's, we got some prices on peanut butter, and apparently peanut butter is more expensive if you buy it at Whole Foods. At Murray's, it's $2. At Whole Foods, it's $2.79. Might not sound like a lot to some people. It might be a lot to others. DC residents on food stamps, $144,000. Clinton, Whole Foods will be more expensive, even if
Yeah.
they reach out to folks in the community and have cooking classes. It's going to be more expensive.
Right, but I just, there's something I want to make clear here. I think there's a perception problem that is a bigger issue with Whole Foods and so forth. I mean, this notion that if it's if it's more affordable for people of lesser, income or fixed income, that it should somehow be like a lesser rate thing. I think that's sort of in itself a problem, is that this notion that sustainable and affordable are kind of two different things. And I just don't want, I would caution people to think that just because a Whole Foods comes in, people who are on a certain amount of income or of a certain socioeconomic level should just feel turned off because of just the price. I mean, like I said, there's a social pressure there that I would hope Whole Foods would try to sort of eliminate for the purposes of not just their own looks, but the neighborhood in general. I mean, you don't want to have a highly segregated place for anything more than just people's choices.
But I mean, doesn't the pressure end up coming from Whole Foods moves in, prices are high at that Whole Foods, property values go up, and people are priced out,
Yeah, it also
and they have to
depends
move
on
away?
who you hire to work in your store. I mean, this is another way to have community outreach that allows people to feel a little differently about what you're offering.
When I was at Murray's today, a 3-pound bag of apples was $3, $1 a pound. I guarantee you
Wow.
there's no Whole Foods where you're going to be able to buy apples for $1 a pound. I mean, it really, I think, does come down to fundamental economics. You just talked
Yeah.
about the food stamp cut. We know that low-income families, by the end of the month, generally have empty cupboards and empty refrigerators. They are figuring out the best way to stretch $1 to buy their food. And if you have a choice to go to a low-cost store, whether it's Walmart or Murray's, versus a Whole Foods, I think there's just no question that it's not only a matter of cultural concerns or marketing, it's a matter of what people can afford.
Yeah.
That people simply can't afford.
And I don't expect Whole Foods to suddenly start marketing to low-income residents. That's just not who their demographic
It's sort of,
is.
yeah, and it's sort of
Well,
not their brand. I mean,
and
we're in an era
I guess
when
that's what I'm saying.
High quality,
though, is
high
that
price food.
Right.
That's
I
what,
don't think that it's unreasonable to consider a shift on that front from on their part. I mean, I just, from a simple business standpoint, it
Right.
wouldn't make sense to just push people out like that, because you're going to turn off people. You're going to turn off people who can afford the food as well if they feel like they're all of a sudden in some weird
Right.
exclusive market. And that's what my point is here: is that you change the perception about who this food is available to. And I know that there obviously the market forces are extremely important, but the perception there, I think, a lot of times is, if you don't feel like you can even walk in because it's not for you, it's going to completely change the way you view things.
Right.
And I think Whole Foods has an opportunity
to change the sort of
the whole
branding and the
paycheck.
association
Yeah.
people make in their heads about Whole Foods
I think they do.
and where you shop as a sort of marker of class, which is where we are now, right?
Whether they do it or not, I don't know.
I hope they
There's
do.
a certain
Yeah.
opportunity for
Yeah.
that.
What's one of the things that, and I talked to the councilman about this too, black flight, black people moving out of the city, and we looked at these particular neighborhoods. The Navy Yard 20 years ago was 85% black. In 1990, it's now 46% black. H Street, where one of these stores is moving, 1990, 70% black, now 43% black. What's your reaction, Ed? I want to go to you, to those stats.
yeah, I mean, we know.
Does it matter? I mean,
Well, it does matter. We know that there are lots of people who have been in tight-knit communities and lived in the district for a long time, and unless their family bought their house when it was affordable, people can't afford to stay. I mean, we see not only African-American families, but lower-income families with children are moving out. Outside of the highest-income neighborhoods in the city, we've lost children decade after decade after decade, and I think that's because people can't afford to live here. So to the extent that we're concerned about having a diverse community, even having a diverse workforce, I mean, the people at Whole Foods are people who are, even if they're better paid jobs than some other retailers, they're still not going to be high-income jobs. Those people need to live somewhere where they can get access to their jobs. So we need a diverse workforce to be able to live in the city, just so that we can function well as a city.
Clayton,
Yeah.
your sense of those numbers?
I mean, look, that's quite honestly, that's a tip of an iceberg that I think socially and economically is very difficult to just sort of stick on a grocery store. I mean, the reasons why people have been leaving the city have been sort of evolving for a while. There was a lot of it, there was a
gap
lot of
between
it
the
that
rich and the
happened,
poor.
quite frankly, by choice 20, 30 years ago, you know, versus what it is now, which is people being sort of pushed out by prices. So it's difficult for me to sort of just equate a Whole Foods to that. But I agree with you on the fact that you've got to have everybody. You can't just make it seem like, oh, well, while us rich people are here, we're going to keep you poor people around to make us feel better about what's happening. I mean, that's not what it's about. The goal is that when everybody buys into a social system that involves each one being able to, again, eat correctly, be educated correctly, and stay around, the entire water level goes up, which is better for society.
Ed, I want to go to you on this. Sort of your crystal ball. Where does this go? What does DC look like 10 years from now?
Well, I think Clinton said it, the market forces are strong, right? I mean, we want our city to grow, and we want to create a climate where people want to live here, and we've done a good job at that, right? We're bringing in 1,000 people every month. So that is, by definition, going to create more pressure on housing prices, more pressure on the rents that retailers have to pay, making it harder for lower-end retailers to succeed.
Like Murray's, yeah.
So it really is only going to work. We can only create that balance is if we as a community and our leaders make a choice. Frankly, I think 8th Street is sort of lost at this point. I mean, it's so gentrified that the ability to preserve affordable housing right there and low-cost retail right there is really going to be a challenge. But there are still plenty of neighborhoods in the city where if we invest in the people to help them get better training or better paid jobs, if we invest in preserving affordable housing so they can stay in their communities,
right.
Invest in schools, and if we invest in retail, if we find a place like the Murray's that is at 6th and H right now, and give them a little bit of support to be a better anchor in the community so they can succeed and serve their community, that's important too.
Ed Lazier of the DC Fiscal Policy Institute and our very own Clinton Yates, Washington Post columnist, thank you both for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much.
That'll do it for us today. The conversation continues now on the Twitters. We want your thoughts on our question of the day. How has Whole Foods changed your neighborhood? Let us know with that hashtag postback, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.